Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Honor the Feminine podcast. We are in the Shame Game series, and this is number 4 in the series, episode 103. There will be plenty of beautiful things in this episode, but if you want the whole context for this journey, I recommend that you go back to the Shame Game series number 1, which is episode 100. A lot of our episodes have been standalone interviews, but this series works a little differently. And going back to episode 100, if you desire to do that, will give you a lot of context and deepen this episode for you. So today, episode 4, I am finding it harder to show up and reveal all my shame areas. I've sat down a number of times to record this episode, and yeah, it is. There's some resistance, and my commitment is to not. My commitment is to continue to sit down and to feel for the right time. What I'm not committed to, which I have been committed to in the past, is pushing through. That does not feel like the right mode for what we're doing here. And it's a really easy mode for me because it's a very innate mode, the pushing through for me. And so this for me is an exercise in surrendering a bit more to the co-creation, with the commitment being I'll continue to show up and see what happens and see what comes forth. And then really be okay with it's not today. And I've had a lot of it's not today's. Yeah. And so I continue to play with, is it the right timing? Is it just my resistance? And my commitment is I will keep showing up. That's what I can tell you. So we've been starting these with an oracle card. And the deck that came forth early on in the Shame Game series was the Mother Mary Oracle by Alana Fairchild. And this is an oracle that I love, and that at times is very prominent for me, and at times very much fades into the background where I'm not drawn to it. But for this series, it felt important and really aligned to be held in the love and grace of Mother Mary, as I felt more deeply into my shame and am sharing it with you. So this Shame Game episode number 4, Enveloped in the Dark, the card that came forth was number 38, Our Lady of the Abundant Garden. And this card is a reminder that Mother Mary provides life without limit. That Source provides life without limit. And that there's no need to fear loss or lack. For everything that dies, new life is created to supplant it. And as I've been enveloped in the dark over the last month, it has become really clear that those things that are dying within me are making space for new. It's an invitation too, though, to delight in life and enjoy all the riches. And that the best way to do that, and the only way to really delight and and enjoy all the riches, is to open your heart and release the fear. Really opening to receive so much more. And Mother Mary's always held space for that. She's there holding space to open to receive to so much more than I could imagine. And so it's an invitation to open to receive to so much more than you could imagine. And as I share what's over the next couple of episodes, what's transpired over the last month, part of me is like, I can't believe it's only been a month. And another part just can feel how deeply held I've been by my guides, by my ancestors, by the archetypal energy of Mother Mary. And I love this card, Our Lady of the Abundant Garden, because there's so much blossoming. There's so much new. It's full of bright colors and flowers, and her face has like green flowers and vines, swirls, the spiral of our evolution on her. And it feels very close to Gaia, to Mother Earth too, which I love. And she's got the flaming heart of passion, reminding us how loved we are. So that's a beautiful stepping off point into this episode. I do want to begin with an update on the release of my law license. As I stepped into this Shame Game series, one of the areas that was up for me and that was holding a lot of shame was that I hadn't relinquished and released my New York law license, even though I haven't practiced in 15 years, and that there was an energy leak there. So a couple of weeks ago, actually on Friday, March 23rd, when the last episode of the Shame Game series actually aired, that afternoon, I got a call from New York from Joanne, who's lovely, up at the grievance committee. And she said, Shannon, I was so happy to get your paperwork. And you dated it May instead of March. And my immediate response was, oh shit, Joanne. And I had the immediate awareness of the ways in which I stand in my own way, where I create my own obstacles. So I talked about how I'd spent a couple of hours pulling the paperwork together, getting it notarized, and here I was needing just to walk through many of those steps again. So I changed the dating, the March to May, the May to March, actually. There I go again. And I took it down. I got it re-notarized. I readdressed the envelopes. I put the stamps on them, and I sent everything off. So that is all in the works. That energetically is out of my hands at this time. But it really was this huge awareness around those ways that I do stand in my own way, the ways in which I can self-sabotage myself. And at this point, I just laugh at it a bit because I've put so much energy around all of this that it's funny to me to be able to really see in such a overt way the ways in which I do this, because often the ways in which we put obstacles in front of ourselves or stand in our own way are much more subtle and much less transparent, at least for me. And this one was so glaring. And so there's been this space for me to just feel into when I'm doing that on a daily basis, or on a note by note, if you will. Yeah. So it feels really good. It's almost as if, even though, say, the official paperwork hasn't come back that says you have relinquished your New York law license, because of the energy that I've put towards it and the intention, a lot of that stuck energy has been resolved. It started to move again. And it creates space in my being for that. And that energy leak is much less prevalent. Like I can feel energetically the difference. So that feels good. And thank you for stepping onto that journey with me and being able to laugh a bit along the way when you accidentally date everything May instead of March. So yeah, from there, I want to turn to, I was at retreat about 5 weeks ago, and I want to share with you what went on there because as I've been talking about, surrender being my intention for this year, and then really stepping into I'm a no to shame, what has come forth is some of my biggest shames have resurfaced, and things that I would have told you that I'd worked through and that, in a silly way, weren't part of me anymore. I know they're always part of me. My relationship had shifted so dramatically with them that they don't really affect me anymore. And I had some of that come spiral back around to revisit it. And so when I was at retreat a few weeks ago, we did an exercise and around how things were moving energetically in my business, a constellation exercise. And what came forward was that energetically, I've not been listening to the people that I serve. And that brought up a lot of shame in me. That shame of, as a child, as a kid, it was always that I wasn't a good listener, right? And so that has been sort of my whole life around being a better listener. And I had this sense as this was going on around, oh my God, how could I not be listening to the people that I'm meant to serve? And in some reflection, I was doing a really good job listening one-on-one to the women that I work with, but not doing a really good job of gauging my whole community and really listening to them and what they were desiring and needing and desiring from me. And so between now and then, I have done a survey, which I know some of you filled out to share yourselves with me, that was really eye-opening and lovely. And anyone who took the time to do that, I'm deeply grateful for. But I had this deep shame come up around, oh my God, I'm not listening. And I have this deep desire to be in service to my community, to the people that I care about really deeply. And I care about my work and my work in the world having an impact and impacting others in a really positive way. And yeah, but I wasn't listening. So all that old stuff, all that shame around not being a good listener and only talking, and that all came up. And what came with it was, again, just this like wave of shame around that I'm bad, right? The feeling of I'm bad for not listening. You've been asked to listen your whole life. How could you not be? Like, I had some of that stirring in me. And the truth is that I'm dancing with in the how best to serve. It's becoming more and more clear. And actually, this experience has helped me become more clear. But one of the things around this shame that lives in me, right? And as I'm talking about it, I can feel the sort of some of the stickiness of it that lives in my body around, not being a good listener, is one of the ways that my daughter pushes my buttons is that she tends not to be a very good listener. And, kids all do this, and it's part of their growing, and you're repeating yourself a lot, and there's a lot coming at them that's new, and there's all of that. But embracing my healing and stepping into around the shame of this feeling of not being a good listener. That it doesn't even feel true, actually. In some ways, I'm a really good deep listener. And in other ways, my mind works really quickly. And so I don't always listen as well or as deeply as I desire to. And so it's both. And it's one of the dances that I do. And I actually feel like part of my healing around this is the way I dance with my daughter. You know, she's 4, she's on her way to 5. The way I dance with her around her listening, right? And how not to shame her for not being a good listener, but instead to create ways for her to listen more fully to herself and to others, right? And so, yeah, I'm dancing a lot with this. And it also really brought up my sense of, because there was also this idea in the exercise of being really focused on spirit, on divine spirit, and the messages coming in, and the relationship I have that has grown so much, particularly in the last year and a half, with divine spirit and my guides. And that I was really focused on that, and then not listening to my community, the people I'm meant to serve. And it's interesting to step back into the ways in which I am very black and white. It's one of those innate things within me that I tend to be very black and white. And so either I'm listening to spirit and my guides and the guidance there, or I'm listening to my community and earthly beings, right? People in my life. It's an either or. It's very black and white. And a lot of my work in this idea of being very black and white is ways in which both can be brought together to weave. I used to think of it as like mixing the white and black paint to create some gray, but really it feels more like threads that get woven together that create this illusion of gray, even though the white and black still hold their integrity. They can integrate and weave together. That creates the gray, if you will. And I've seen this in a number of areas. And so as I say it out loud, it feels a little ridiculous to be like, it's either listening to spirit or it's listening to my community. I mean, when I see it that way, when it becomes clear like that, I'm like, that is so silly. There's so many places to weave all of this together for one to inform the other, for neither to be more important than the other, right? And so I think part of this break that had happened and the shame that came up was around me, and I'm just feeling this a little more now, more deeply, me giving too much credit and credence to the spiritual, the divine messages coming through from my guides, and not enough to, what I'm feeling from my community, right? And really listening to what they have to say. And as I started to, just in the last month, as just doing a simple survey, that again, it feels such heartfelt gratitude for those that took the time to share themselves. It has been beautiful to watch the weaving of what's come forth from that for me. And so, and that I can better serve all of you, anyone who's looking to do that, right? And so yeah, and the one of the new offerings has been birthed out of that, and there's just some really juicy stuff bubbling up from both coming together and integrating, and me being able to see that dance. I mean, I think back to other ways in which things have felt really like black and white. And, one of the ones that's come up over the last year and a half is that dance between my mystic and my mother. So that part of me that's mystical and can drop into the signs and symbols and the energies and the magic of life and the frequencies and divine blueprints and all of these things, the archetypal energies, the oracle cards, all of it, right? And then there were these times that were happening actually on a pretty regular basis where stepping into the role of mothering my 4-year-old felt like to me that it was taking me out of my mystical self. And part of that feels like that as I was deepening into trusting my mystical self more and the energies around that, there was this tension between the two. And so again, another place of I can either be in my mystic or in my mother. And this resentment of, in those moments when I needed to be in my mother, it was taking me out of my mystic. As I started to see that I created this dichotomy, this black and white, right? This divisiveness, I started to be able to feel how the motherhood, being a mother and the motherhood journey was informing my mystic, and how my mystic could inform the mother part of me. And again, this dance. And I still have those moments where I do feel sort of pulled out of and can have some resentment around that. But I'm more aware of that now. But that really black and white, right? And so as I'm seeing this, as what's the feelings are coming in, and the wave of shame that came in was, oh my God, I'm not listening to my community, to the people that I serve. It created this this popping out of my body. Like I got really ungrounded. Like I popped out. And yeah, because the shame came in and it was too much all at once, and I popped out. And then for me, and likely for many of us, once that starts to happen for me, I have a hard time coping, because the tools, not once I get really ungrounded like that, and it's scary for me, because that was part of my mom's pattern, and it's part of the pattern that I believe contributed to her Alzheimer's. And so yeah, so this happens, and I'm dealing with this being popped out of the body, and when it's happening, I can see it much better now in like 2020, right? Back over the last 5 weeks than in that moment. It's harder to tell for me. It was suggested that perhaps I was having a hard time processing, which as I look back, I was having a hard time processing. The shame of not listening and had come in, and there was these waves of that. And it was suggested that maybe because of my mom's history, and my mom was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. So she was diagnosed at 62. My mom was diagnosed at a point where it had already progressed a good bit. Um, yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to tell like sort of how long, but probably for at least 2 to 3 years before, things had been deteriorating. And I can remember times when she'd do something that was off, and I'd chalk it up to, oh, she's really tired, or oh, this, or oh, that. And so when it was suggested that I have my cognition checked, right? Like my memory, basically, in what would be like a neuropsych eval. I was already in this state of being in shame about not being a good listener, and it had started to tie in with like not being a good businesswoman and not listening and all of these things. And then it was suggested that maybe what was going on with what I heard was maybe what was going on with my mom was starting to go on with me. And like, that was my biggest fear. And I watched everything around me go black and like fall in on itself. And it got real dark. It got really, really dark. And I spent some time in my shadow. And what really came up was acknowledging that, getting Alzheimer's is a huge fear for me. And those feelings of I won't be able to take care of my daughter and all of these things, right? But the other thing that came in with that suggestion was a tsunami of shame around, like a tsunami for me of shame around, I'm broken. I knew I was broken. And now everybody's going to know I'm broken and no one's going to love me. And it brings up tears even as I say it now. And I could even feel it in that moment as everything went dark. I could feel that was the shame that was just coming up within me. I'm broken. I knew I was broken. And now everybody's going to know it. No one's going to love me. And I would have told you 6 weeks ago that I had healed a lot of that. For me, a lot of that came in when my boyfriend in high school and college, when he died in a freak accident over 20 years ago. That was that first time everything sort of went black and like fell in on itself. And that deep feeling of I'm broken took its place within my system. Like that might have been there already in my cells, but that like triggered, like turned the light switch on so that lived in me, right? And again, I would have told you that I'd healed a lot of that. And yet here it was again as I was spiraling around to it. And what feels true today is that this idea that we're broken, that I'm broken, a lot of us live with that. This feeling of being broken in this way or that way. And we spend a lot of time and energy hiding that from the world because people won't love us, or that feels, because that one's so mine. I can't think of how anyone else would. Isn't that funny? Yeah. So we spend all this time and energy, or I have spent, and I believe many of us spend a lot of time and energy hiding how broken we are, quote unquote broken we are. We're all broken. We all have trauma. We have trauma that came in with ourselves from ancestries and lineages and lifetimes. It's not all ours. But here's the thing, is that when we start to realize that we all have that part of ourselves where we feel broken, and as we start to acknowledge that and share it with each other, it's actually a point of connection versus a point of disconnection. So this like huge fear of like, I'm broken and no one's going to love me. Instead coming forward and being like, I'm broken and here's the ways in which I feel that way, is a point of connection and a permission for the people in my life to say, you know what, I feel broken in that way too, or I feel broken in this way. And it becomes this point of connection and this place of compassion for ourselves and for each other. And that's huge, because that's the healing of shame. Right? When it becomes compassion for each other, when it becomes an understanding, when it becomes a point of connection. And while not all of this shame is mine, as I said, it comes down through lineages and ancestors and lifetimes. I'm willing to heal it. I'm willing to heal it for myself, for my daughter, for my ancestors, for our world. And I believe this is how we make a really big impact. I believe that we make this really big impact by healing ourselves. As we do, we give permission to others around us to heal themselves in ways sometimes that we can't even imagine. But it's the work that's done. And our work is ours to do. No one can do it for you. But my experience is it's also not done alone. And next week, I'm going to talk about this feeling of being really broken and then the path to healing, and so much of what came up and so many things that have become more clear for me. Yeah, and in that, I wanted to say that I did go to a neuropsychologist at Duke, and we talked, and she did some tests, and she said my cognition is just fine. She said, Shannon, I can't even write down that there's any mild cognitive. And I thought that, great. And what a beautiful baseline. But the fear around being pushed to face, like the catalyst to face my biggest fears and to feel my biggest shames, it's part of the healing. But it's been hard. And this healing will go on for a while. And there's parts of it that are already really beautiful. And then there's parts that are just hard. Both. And so next week I'll be talking about that feeling of being broken and the path that I've walked to healing some of that and some of my realizations along the way. So thank you for joining me today for Shame Game number 4, Enveloped in the Dark. I got dropped in deep. Yeah. I'm not the same woman who is talking to you today that showed up at retreat, 5 weeks ago, 30 some days ago. So, and I'm like I said, it hasn't always been easy, and it has been one step and one step. But I'm embracing my healing journey. Yeah. So the one thing that I did want to share with you is that if you are listening to this in real time, which is April 2018, April 11th, what was birthed out of the beautiful survey answers and my divine guidance was something called Ignite Your Spark sessions. And so right now, in the month of April, between now and April 22nd, it is my birthday month. My birthday is on the 20th, and I will be 43. I'm doing some special pricing on these Ignite Your Spark sessions that are a one-to-one with me. So it starts with an oracle card pull prior to your session. We do a 50-minute session together, and then there's an oracle card pull after your session, along with the video recording and a written resources and action steps, that kind of thing. And what the Ignite Your Spark sessions are really about are creating more clarity. So if there's a project that you've really been wanting to do but held yourself back on, if there's a life transition that you've been desiring to step into that you can feel coming, but you're looking for some clarity around that, this is the type of session for you. So what we do is we're going to drop in together, and the clarity is going to come from you. But being in space together lets it unlock. And so what I'll be doing is creating the space for us to drop into. We'll be doing it virtually. And then as the clarity comes through, I'll capture that. We'll mingle it with some intuitive guidance. And the idea is for you to have a lot of clarity about your next step. Because sometimes we can feel stuck, right? There are moments where we do need to pause, but sometimes there are moments where we just feel stuck, like there's no motion. And this is a way to break up some resistance around and start to move in a direction. And so if your body reacts to that, like with tingling or with a calm, or some sort of, spark, you can feel more deeply into that over at honorthefeminine.com. There's a tab for Ignite Your Spark. And I would love to come together and do some work like this. It's really where my work is at. It's around finding that place that's innately your worth and creating clarity around next steps and breaking up resistance. It's the work I've been doing for myself and with others to help me do mine. And it's ready for those that are desiring that and to do it with me right now. So again, you can do that. You can feel in more deeply with that over at honorthefeminine.com, Ignite Your Spark. All right. I will be with you again next week for Shame Game number 5. Have a great day.